YouTube, Big G back in with another video, and it's Friday Foursome time again. Number 25 for May. Novabug posed this question, and I've got until the end of May for me to put through my entry. And the question that was posed by Novabug was, what are your 4 gaming disappointments or gaming related disappointments from back in the day? So I thought about this, and I think I've come up with my 4 main gaming disappointments from back in the day. So number 1, this game over here, Jetpack for the Spectrum 48K. Ran on 16K as well. So Jetpack was a fantastic game. It was one of the first games that I played on the Spectrum, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's got smooth scrolling, movement, the graphics are great, the gameplay is great. So everything about the game is great. So, you know, why is it one of my disappointments? For the simple reason that I can remember playing this for days and days on end, and it becomes so monotonous after a while. You've just got that one screen, you know, you fill up your spaceship with the resources, with the fuel, it takes off, it comes down at land, and you do it over and over and over again. Yes, the enemies change, and then, you know, it becomes a little bit more difficult, but it becomes so monotonous. I just wish that they had included you know, once your spaceship had taken off, there was another change screen or something like that. You then had to guide your spaceship through an asteroid belt to the next planet, landed, collected resources again, and then, you know, would have just added so much more to the game. And they had a lot of space to work with. I mean, this was 16K, or it ran with a 16K machine, so, you know, they could have done something like it. And I'm sure that maybe they didn't, because they wanted this to run on all machines, all the Spectrums, which is great. But if they had added that additional screen in, it would have just mixed it up a bit more, made it that much more enjoyable, and would have made this great game absolutely brilliant. So, gaming disappointment number 1, Spectrum. Gaming disappointment number 2. Now, that refers to my Spectra video over here. One of my favorite 8-bits from back in the day. I love my Spectra Video 328. Great machine. The problem about it is gaming. It just doesn't have a lot of games that you can play with it. The unfortunate part is, although this was used as the basis for the MSX standard, it wasn't compatible with the MSX. So you couldn't play MSX games on a native 328. You could, yes, you could use an adapter and then play ColecoVision games on it, or if you got the Spectra Video 7 to 8, you could have played MSX games then. But for those of us that owned these machines back in the day, you were stuck with the Spectra Video library, and it was a very small library. There wasn't a lot of games, and not a lot of good games. So that was a missed opportunity. Loved the machine, one of my favorites, but it didn't have enough games. So big gaming disappointment for the Spectra Video from back in the day. Number 3, gaming disappointment. Let's move back to the Spectrum. For what you got, the Spectrum delivered in buckets. So you got a lot of bang for your buck. So it was cheap, but you know, you got a huge games library, you could play games, the games are good, everything about it great. But the disappointing, or for me, what was disappointing with the Spectrum was its sound capabilities. They were almost non-existent. Yes, you got the beeps, the boops, and sound effects and so forth, but it was really dismal when it came to sound. I just wish that Clive Sinclair had designed or put a little bit more effort, or made it a little bit more expensive, and just gave it a little bit more of a sound capability for the Spectrum. I know you could add, you know, get adapters that improved the sound, added speech, and did this and that, but if it had the ability to play sound like, let's say for example, the Commodore, or even the MSX machines had a decent sound chip in it, yes, it would have been a little bit more expensive, but the games would have been absolutely fantastic. I mean, I hated the fact that the Commodore 64 owners had better sound, because the Spectrum had awesome games, just let down with the sound capabilities. I didn't really mind the color bleeding and, you know, that sort of thing. That didn't really worry me, but the sound could have been so much better. So number 3 gaming disappointment goes to you, Spectrum. And the 4th gaming disappointment, sticking with the Spectrum, again I'm picking on the Spectrum, and that is simply, out of the box, it was a bare bones machine. You had to have an adapter if you wanted to play, use a joystick and so forth. And I know it was done to keep costs down. But the other disappointment was that you couldn't just plug in cartridge games. I wish it had the ability to play cartridge games. Now, I've got one cartridge game here that came out later, this chess game. And it came with this awesome little cartridge over here. They plugged into a adapter, your interface 2, and then you could play this cartridge game there. I just wish the Spectrum had the ability, if it had a little slot over here, drop down, you could put the cartridge in there, and you could actually play. And I mean, it would look absolutely awesome, having that little cartridge game in there, and having instantaneous loading. Because that's the big thing about cartridge games. I mean, you used to sit for 5 minutes waiting for a game to load up on the Spectrum. I mean, we didn't all have micro drives, which was also a pain in the butt. And these only came out very late in the life cycle for a Spectrum. Now, most machines back then, like the 328, came native with a slot. You could plug cartridge games, even though this was limited with the amount of cartridge games that you actually had, you could still play cartridge games. So it had too few cartridge games, and it had no cartridge games. And I think it would have been great to have been able to, have bought cartridge games. And I think it would have done well, early on in the life cycle of the machine, to have the ability to do that. Spent a little bit more money on a game, especially some of your bigger games that took longer to load, and you could then play it instantaneously without any errors or issues and problems. And what normally happens is the guys make use of that additional slot or that additional ability there for you to add further enhancements to the machine. So yeah, that's what I would have liked to have seen. So guys, that's my 4 gaming disappointments. Jetpack for the Spectrum, for the reasons I gave. The Spectra Video for its lack of games. The Spectrum again for its sound capabilities. And the Spectrum again for its inability or not being able to play cartridge games from back in the day. So yeah, put your comments down below what your 4 gaming disappointments were, or post a video. It's always great to take part in these community type videos. Yeah, that's all from me guys. Cheers, and remember, keep it retro.